This is lecture 57G and the last lecture in our 9 or 10 lecture series on Vietnam in the ABCs of Communism, Bolshevism 2018, which will be in volume 3 on communism in East Asia next year when it appears, when you get your book. And in this particular lecture we're talking about the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, 1976 to 2017. In the aftermath of the war, which we covered in the last lecture, the government embarked on a mass campaign of collectivization of farms and factories. In 1978, the SRV military invaded Cambodia to remove the Khmer Rouge and installed a Marxist-Leninist government in Cambodia. Now, it's been renamed the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. In 1986, the 6th National Congress of the Communist Party of Vietnam was held, and a new leadership was elected, headed by 71-year-old Nguyen Van Linh, who became the party's general secretary. Linh implemented a series of reforms called renovation, or Doi Moi in Vietnamese. These carefully managed the transition from a planned economy to a socialist-oriented market economy. Under renovation, the government encouraged a form of private ownership of farms and factories, decentralized economic regulation, and supervised foreign investment. By private ownership of farms and factories, they pretty much mean, for the most part, collective farm ownership or collective workers' ownership of factories. All strategic industries were and are government-owned. The Vietnamese economy subsequently achieved strong growth in agricultural and industrial production and construction in general, and exports and foreign investment. Central planning involves the collective farms, the factories, and economic capital. Millions of people work in these production centers. Collapse of the Soviet bloc negatively affected Vietnam, but it recovered under its own initiative. From 1990 to 1997, Vietnam achieved around 8% annual GDP growth, and from 2000 to 2005, the Vietnamese economy continued to grow at an annual rate of around 7% to be the world's fastest growing. In 2008, confronted by the global capitalist depression, economic growth remained strong. The Vietnamese economy is directed by the Vietnamese Communist Party in 5-year plans. These are submitted to full meetings of the Central Committee. The party then instructs the government to implement the plans, and the government does so by approval of the National Congress, which in turn passes the plan to the appropriate ministries. Deep poverty and relative poverty is less than that of China, India, and the Philippines. This decline in poverty is due to the equitable economic policies aimed at improving living standards and preventing the rise of inequality. Egalitarian land distribution from the onset of the Doi Moi program, investment in poor remote areas, and the subsidizing of education and health care account for rising affluence. Manufacturing, information technology, and high-tech industries now form a large and fast-growing part of the national economy. In 2010, Vietnam was ranked as the 8th largest crude petroleum producer in Asia and Pacific region. In 2011, although Vietnam was a relative newcomer to the oil industry, it had become the 3rd largest oil producer in Southeast Asia. Its total output that year was 318,000 barrels of oil per day and 51,000 cubic meters of natural gas per day. In 2012, Vietnam's nominal GDP reached US $138 billion, with a nominal GDP per capita of $1,527. According to a December 2005 forecast by Goldman Sachs, the Vietnamese economy would become the world's 21st largest by 2025, with an estimated nominal GDP of $436 billion and a nominal GDP per capita of $4,357. According to a 2008 forecast by PricewaterhouseCoopers, Vietnam may be the fastest growing of the world's emerging economies by 2025, with a potential growth rate of almost 10% per annum in real dollar terms. In 2012, HSBC predicted that Vietnam's total GDP would surpass those of Norway, Singapore, and Portugal by 2050. According to the IMF, the unemployment rate in Vietnam stood at 4.46% in 2012. Now, since the early 2000s, Vietnam has applied sequenced trade liberalization, a two-track approach opening some sectors of the economy to international markets while protecting others. In July 2006, Vietnam updated its intellectual property legislation to comply with TRIPS, T-R-I-P-S, and became a member of WTO on 11 January 2007. Vietnam is now one of Asia's most open economies. Two-way trade was valued at around 160% of GDP in 2006, more than twice the contemporary ratio for China and over 4 times the ratio for India. Vietnam's chief trading partners include China, Japan, Australia, the ASEAN countries, that's ASEAN, the United States, and Western Europe. Vietnam's Customs Office reported in July 2013 that the total value of international merchandise trade for the first half of 2013 was US $124 billion, which was 15.7% higher than the same period in 2012. Mobile phones and their parts were both imported and exported in large numbers, while in the natural resources market, crude oil was a top-ranking export, and high levels of iron and steel were imported during this period. The U.S. was the country that purchased the highest amount of Vietnam's exports, while Chinese goods were the most popular Vietnamese import. As a result of several land reform measures, Vietnam has become a major exporter of agricultural products. It is now the world's largest producer of cashew nuts, with a 1/3 global share, the largest producer of black pepper, accounting for 1/3 of the world's market, and the second largest rice exporter in the world after Thailand. Vietnam is the world's second largest exporter of coffee. Vietnam has the highest proportion of land use for permanent crops, that is 7%, of any nation in the greater Mekong subregion. Other primary exports include tea, rubber, and fishery products. However, agriculture's share of Vietnam's GDP has fallen in recent decades, declining from 42% in '89 to 20% in 2006 because production in other sectors of the economy has risen dramatically. In Vietnam-U.S. trade, the GE Power Chief Executive Officer Steve Boltze disclosed that General Electric will do new business worth about $6 billion with Vietnam. He said this on the 30th of May of 2017 when Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc announced that he will sign multiple deals valued between 15 and 17 billion with U.S. corporations. At any rate, going back to this meeting that was just held a few days ago in Vietnam, the Prime Minister revealed that the deals are mainly for high-tech products and services. Vietnam, he said, will increase the import of high technologies and services from the United States, and on the occasion of this visit, many important deals will be made. Phuc said at a U.S. Chamber of Commerce dinner. Phuc is scheduled to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump on the 31st of May this year. Now, General Electric Power Chief Executive Officer Steve Boltze said that General Electric will do new business worth about $6 billion with Vietnam. Meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and other Trump administration officials pledged to reduce bilateral trade deficits with their major partners. Quote, over the last decade, our bilateral trade deficit has risen from about $7 billion to nearly $32 billion, Lighthizer said. This growth in our trade deficit represents new challenges and shows us that there is considerable potential to improve further our important trade relationship, unquote. The $32 billion deficit with Vietnam's last year's sixth largest for the U.S., it is reflective of the growth in the volume of imports from Vietnamese. The products range from semiconductors and other electronics to footwear, apparel, and furniture. Vietnamese Trade Minister Tran Tuan On called on the U.S. to remove an inspection program on catfish, speed up import licenses for its fruit, as well as urging them to make fair decisions on anti-dumping and anti-subsidy measures regarding Vietnamese products. Vietnam's current aim is to recover from the setback experienced when Trump ditched the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact that was poised to be of significant benefit to Hanoi and to focus on reducing U.S. trade policy deficits. And that apparently seems to be going pretty well now. Vietnam in the Global Belt and Road. Quote, despite being developing countries, Vietnam and China have rapidly advanced more than other countries. China should share its development opportunities and accomplishments with other countries, unquote, said a scholar who has spent a significant amount of time studying China-related affairs. He went on to explain that following China's terms of connectivity in 5 areas, namely connectivity of policy, transportation, trade, currency, and the heart of the peoples, the summit should stress the importance of economic sharing, which is also in line with China's neighborly diplomacy that brings favorable opportunities and results to neighboring countries, unquote. The expert also said he believes that the summit will help bolster the national reputation of China in the world and in the region, especially in the context of rising trade protectionism. While suggesting that the content of the Belt and Road Initiative should be made clear to even lay people as well as enterprises, Sam said, quote, if people find it beneficial and it creates more jobs and provides higher income, then they will voluntarily join the initiative, unquote. Echoing Sam, Tai said holding a summit is, quote, the right step for China in its efforts to institutionalize the Belt and Road Initiative and make it a regular high-level mechanism in the region, unquote. Tai also said he expected that the upcoming summit will clarify the strategy, content, and yield concrete results so that regional countries will be further encouraged and engage more actively in the forum. In the world today, before joining any mechanisms, countries must fully assess the potential benefits. I believe that the forum will succeed in communicating the myriad advantages, said the Vietnamese official. On how to boost economic development in the countries along the Belt and Road, Tai said, building a street or a seaport is not enough. The most important thing is to provide socio-economic solutions to the people and local authorities where the infrastructures are located so they can see the total benefits. When China does this, the value of the Belt and Road initiatives as well as other Chinese proposals will grow exponentially. Looking forward, Sam highlighted 3 important words: practical, effective, balanced. The scholar said to maintain economic development among countries along the Belt and Road, economic sharing should be stressed so that all sides will benefit and win-win outcomes will be seen. The project should not be formalistic, but must bring practical, effective, and well-balanced benefits to local people. Vietnamese President Tran Day Quang said on 16 May 2017 that globalization is irreversible. Quang made the remarks at the opening ceremony of a multi-stakeholder dialogue on the Asian-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, toward 2020 and beyond, held in the Vietnamese capital, and the framework of the ongoing APEC Second Senior Officials Meeting, SOM2, and related meetings. Against the backdrop that doubts on globalization and benefits of free trade are arising in some parts of the world, Quang affirmed that globalization is indispensable and irreversible. However, we can absolutely contribute to reforming the globalization process in a more humane, inclusive, and sustainable way, adding that it's time for the APEC economies to send out a message of continuing their commitments to keeping opening up markets, boosting regional economic connectivity, and supporting a new, better globalization process. In the coming 2 or 3 decades, APEC should show its vitality, dynamism, resilience, and accountability, taking good leadership role in dealing with global and regional challenges such as climate change, aging population, income inequality, natural disasters, and epidemics, among others, proposed the Vietnamese president. Don Campbell, co-chair of the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, for his part, said at the ceremony that after the global financial crisis, APEC emphasized the need for future growth to be more balanced, inclusive, sustainable, innovative, and secure, to be achieved through a new growth strategy which echoes and updates APEC's founding vision. The Belt and Road Initiative refers to the Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, a significant development strategy launched by the Chinese government with the intention of promoting economic cooperation among countries along the proposed Belt and Road routes. The initiative has been designed to enhance the orderly free flow of economic factors and the efficient allocation of resources. It is also intended to further market integration and create a regional economic cooperation framework of benefit to all. The National Development and Reform Commission issued its vision and actions on jointly building the Silk Road Economic Belt and 21st Century Maritime Silk Road on the 28th of March 2015. This outlined the framework, key areas of cooperation, and cooperation mechanisms with regard to the Belt and Road Initiative. It aims to connect Asia, Europe, and Africa along 5 routes. The first, linking China to Europe through Central Asia and Russia. The second, connecting China with the Middle East through Central Asia. The third, bringing together China and Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Indian Ocean. The 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, meanwhile, focuses on using Chinese coastal ports. 4. These link China with Europe through the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. And 5. Connecting China with the South Pacific Ocean through the South China Sea. The Belt and Road 5 routes take advantage of international transport routes as well as core cities and key ports to further strengthen collaboration and build 6 international economic cooperation corridors, the first of which is the new Eurasian Landbridge, also known as the Second Eurasian Landbridge. It's an international railway line running from Lianyungang in China's Jiangsu province through Alashankou and Xinjiang to Rotterdam in Holland. The China section of the line comprises the Lanzhou-Lianyungang Railway and stretches through eastern, central, and western China. After exiting Chinese territory, the new land bridge passes through Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus, and Poland, reaching a number of coastal ports in Europe. Capitalizing on the new Eurasian Landbridge, China has opened an international freight rail route linking Chongqing to Duisburg, Germany, and a direct freight train running from Wuhan to Pardubice, Czech Republic. Also, there is a freight rail route from Chengdu to Lodz, Poland, and a freight rail route from Zhengzhou to Hamburg, Germany. All routes offer rail-to-rail freight transport as well as the convenience of a one declaration, one inspection, one cargo release for any cargo transported. Secondly, the China-Mongolia-Russia Economic Corridor. Linked by land, China, Mongolia, and Russia have long established various economic ties and cooperation by way of frontier trade and cross-border cooperation. In September 2014, when the 3 countries' heads of state met for the first time at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, Dushanbe Summit, agreement was reached on forging tripartite cooperation based on China-Russia, China-Mongolia, and Russia-Mongolia bilateral ties. At the same meeting, the principles, directions, and key areas of trilateral cooperation were defined. The 3 heads of state also agreed to bring together the building of China's Silk Road Economic Belt, the renovation of Russia's Eurasian Landbridge, and the proposed development of Mongolia's Steppe Road. This commitment will strengthen rail and highway connectivity and construction, advance customs clearance and transport facilitation, promote cross-national cooperation in transportation, and help establish the Russia-China-Mongolia Economic Corridor. In July 2015, the 3 leaders held a second meeting in the Russian city of Ufa. This second summit saw the official adoption of the midterm roadmap for development of trilateral cooperation between China, Russia, and Mongolia. Thirdly, the China-Central Asia-West Asia Economic Corridor. The China-Central Asia-West Asia Economic Corridor runs from Xinjiang in China and exits the country via Alashankou to join the railway networks of Central Asia and West Asia before reaching the Mediterranean coast and the Arabian Peninsula. The corridor mainly covers 5 countries in Central Asia: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, as well as Iran and Turkey in West Asia. At the 3rd China Central Asia Cooperation Forum held in Shandong in June of 2015, a commitment to jointly building the 6th Silk Road Economic Belt was incorporated into a joint declaration signed by China and the 5 Central Asian countries. Before that, China had signed bilateral agreements on the building of the Silk Road Economic Belt with Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. China had also concluded a cooperation document with Uzbekistan on the building of the Silk Road Economic Belt, and this was aimed at further deepening and expanding mutually beneficial cooperation, such areas as trade, investment, finance, transport, and communication. The national development strategies of the 5 Central Asian countries, including Kazakhstan's Road to Brightness, Tajikistan's Energy, Transport, and Food, and Turkmenistan's Strong and Happy Era. In the Silk Road Economic Belt, they hope to pick up where they left off with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Fourthly, the Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor. During the 5th Leaders' Meeting on Greater Mekong Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation held in Bangkok in December 2014, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang put forward 3 suggestions with regard to deepening the relations between China and the 5 countries in the Indo-Chinese Peninsula. The suggestions included: 1. Jointly planning and building an extensive transportation network, as well as a number of industrial cooperation projects; 2. Creating a new mode of cooperation for fundraising; and 3. Promoting sustainable and coordinated socioeconomic development. Currently, the countries along the Greater Mekong River are engaged in building 9 cross-national highways connecting east and west and linking north to south. Many of these construction projects have been completed. Guangxi has already finished work on an expressway leading to the Friendship Gate and the port of Dongshong at the China-Vietnam border. The province has also opened an international rail line running from Nanning to Hanoi, as well as introducing air routes to several major Southeast Asian cities. Now, 5th, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Premier Li Keqiang first raised the concept of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor during his visit to Pakistan in May of 2013. At the time, the objective was to build an economic corridor running from Kashgar, Xinjiang in the north, to Pakistan's Gwadar port in the south. At present, the 2 governments have mapped out a provisional long-term plan for building highways, railways, oil and natural gas pipelines, and optic fiber networks stretching from Kashgar to Gwadar port. According to a joint declaration issued by China and Pakistan in Islamabad in April 2015, the 2 countries will proactively advance key cooperation projects, including Phase 2 of the upgrade and renovation of the Karakoram Highway, that is the Tekhat-Havelian section, an expressway at the East Bay of Gwadar Port, a new international airport, and expressway from Karachi to Lahore, the Multan Sukur section, the Lahore Rail Transport Orange Line, the Hair-Ruba Economic Zone, and the China-Pakistan Cross-National Optic Fiber Network. Sixthly, the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar Economic Corridor. In a series of meetings during Premier Li Keqiang's visit to India in May 2013, China and India jointly proposed the building of the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar Economic Corridor. In December 2013, the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar Economic Corridor Joint Working Group convened its first meeting in Kunming. Official representatives from the 4 countries conducted in-depth discussions about the development prospects, priority areas of cooperation, and cooperation mechanisms for the economic order. They also reached extensive consensus on cooperation in such areas as transportation, infrastructure, investment, and commercial circulation and people-to-people connectivity. The 4 parties signed meeting minutes and agreed the Bangladesh China-India-Myanmar Economic Corridor Joint Study Program, establishing a mechanism for promoting cooperation among the four governments. Now, seventh, key areas of cooperation are the 5 major goals of the Belt and Road Initiative. 1. Policy coordination. 2. Facilities connectivity. 3. Unimpeded trade. 4. Financial integration. And 5. People-to-people bonds. Policy coordination means the countries along the Belt and Road will, via consultation on an equal footing, jointly formulate development plans and measures for advancing cross-national or regional cooperation, resolve problems arising from cooperation through consultation, and jointly provide policy support to practical cooperation and large-scale project implementation. Facilities connectivity refers to prioritizing areas of construction as part of the Belt and Road Strategy. Efforts will be made to give priority to removing barriers in the missing sections and bottleneck areas of core international transportation passages, advancing the construction of port infrastructure facilities, and clearing land-water intermodal transport passages. The connectivity of infrastructure facilities, including railways, highways, air routes, telecommunications, oil and natural gas pipelines, and ports will also be promoted. This will form part of a move to establish an infrastructure network connecting various Asian subregions with other parts of Asia, Europe, and Africa. In order to facilitate unimpeded trade, steps will be taken to resolve investment and trade facilitation issues, reduce investment and trade barriers, lower trade and investment costs, as well as to promote regional economic integration. Efforts will also be made to broaden the scope of trade, propel trade development through investment, and strengthen cooperation in the industry chain with all related countries. With regard to financial integration, action will be taken to enhance coordination in monetary policy, expand the scope of local currency settlement and currency exchange in trade and investment between countries along the route, deepen multilateral and bilateral financial cooperation, set up regional development, financial institutions, strengthen cooperation in monitoring financial risks, and enhance the ability of managing financial risks through regional arrangements. In terms of people-to-people bonds, efforts will be made to promote exchanges and dialogues between different cultures, strengthen friendly interactions between the people in various countries, and heighten mutual understanding and traditional friendships. These are the basis for the advancement of regional cooperation. Cooperation mechanisms. The Belt and Road Initiative upholds the principles of jointly developing the program through consultation with all interested parties. Existing bilateral and multilateral cooperation mechanisms will be utilized to promote the integration of the development strategies of the countries along the route. Steps will be taken to advance the signing of cooperation memorandums of understanding or cooperation plans for the establishment of a number of bilateral cooperation demonstration projects. Efforts will also be made to set up a sound bilateral joint work mechanism and devise an implementation plan and action roadmap for advancing the Belt and Road Strategy. The Silk Road Fund of U.S. $40 billion has been established to finance the Belt and Road Initiative. It will invest mainly in infrastructure and resources, as well as in industrial and financial cooperation. The fund was set up as a limited liability company in December of 2014, with its founding shareholders including China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange, the China Investment Corporation, the Export-Import Bank of China, and the China Development Bank. The fund will comply with market rules and the International Order of Finance and welcome participation from domestic and overseas investors such as the China Africa Development Fund and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The first capital installation of the fund amounts to U.S. $10 billion. On 14 May 2017, President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the opening ceremony of the Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation and announced that China would contribute an additional 100 billion yuan to the Silk Road Fund, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The AIIB is a new multilateral development bank, MTB, and it has been set up with a view to complementing and cooperating with the existing MTBs to address infrastructure needs in Asia. AIIB will focus on the development of infrastructure and other productive sectors in Asia, including energy and power, transportation and telecommunication, rural infrastructure and agriculture development, water supply and sanitation, environmental protection, urban development and logistics. As of December 2015, all of the 57 prospective founding members of AIIB had signed the Articles of Agreement, and the initial signatories were Australia, Austria, Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Brazil, Brunei, Dar es Salaam, Cambodia, China, Denmark, Egypt, Finland, France, Georgia, Germany, Iceland, India, Indonesia, Iran, Israel, Italy, Jordan, Kazakhstan, the Republic of Korea, Kyrgyz Republic, Kuwait, Laos, PDR, the People's Democratic Republic, Luxembourg, Malaysia, Maldives, Malta, Mongolia, Myanmar, Nepal, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Oman, Pakistan, Philippines, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Africa, Spain, Sri Lanka, Sweden, Switzerland, Tajikistan, Thailand, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. As of 13 May 2017, the AIIB had 77 approved members and prospective members in total, including Hong Kong. The AIIB Articles of Agreement entered into force on 25th of December of 2015, and on January 16th of 2016, the Board of Governors held its inaugural meeting, declaring the bank open for business and electing Mr. Jin Lee Kun as president for an initial 5-year term. Now, that brings us to an end of our Vietnamese lectures. You can see that Vietnam has become a world power in many different areas of industry and export, and the Socialist Republic of Vietnam that emerged from this very long period of anti-colonial war has been quite successful. Next, we're going to move on to the Philippines.